Yep, I'm here. You didn't think I'd miss session 3, did you? Hello again, everyone, on-site and online. Your energy levels still looking ace. That's good. Keep it up. Next, we dive into session 3, Climate Extremes and Energy Futures, Rebuilding Strategy for Resilient Growth. A crucial conversation on climate extremes, resilient energy systems, and building strategy that survives the future and not just hopes for it. And leading this panel is the outstanding Joanne Flin, Chairwoman of the ESG Institute and author of Greensight, helping global leaders accelerate the journey to net zero and beyond with commercially strategic ESG transformation. She's a former country head of PwC Financial Services Consulting, co-founded The Change Leaders at Oxford, and holds academic credentials across economics, law, finance, and change leadership.
Joanne, born in Australia and absolutely smashing it across Asia. How are you, girl? It's been a year since I saw you, right? But right now, I just noticed you have such beautiful eyes. Oh, by the way, I heard Singapore's been pouring rain lately. So it's lovely to see you here, all bright, calm, and radiant. Fair dinkum, and you surely look ready to take charge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause for Joanne Flin. The stage is yours.
The most amazing, I'm awed by that one. Borg, you are amazing. Thank you. G'day, mate. How are you all going? Excellent. That's probably the last bit of an Australian accent you'll hear from me. I, as ever, thoroughly enjoy being here, and I am very much looking forward to the panel discussion that we have coming up. Now, yesterday in the masterclass workshop, we talked about the shift from risk management as a hindsight-focused profession into a foresight-focused, innovative, strategic option. And that was very much came out of the last panel. So, what we're going to do in this session is have a live, living, and I'm going to put this down, case study of these decisions in action. Indonesia's energy sector is a leading sector in the transition from a high carbon to a low carbon energy system. It's quite fundamental of what's happening here. It's key to the shift for the country from a 2060 plan to a potential 2050 plan. And who knows what's possible, maybe even other opportunities coming from that. So, but the challenge is there are abundant fossil fuels here. You know, this is part of the practical reality, and it's not to be dismissed. Energy is key for growth and the future and the health and the opportunities that every Indonesian has, and likewise for other parts of ASEAN and Southeast Asia. So, I am totally and utterly looking forward to this, because this is not a compliance exercise, this is a strategy exercise. It's strategy under uncertainty. That has been the repetitive frame in the last 2 days. So we have 3 amazing speakers, and I would like them to come up and join me. So Firman is from Medico Energy. If you could gracefully come up, wonderful man. We had at GRC a couple of months ago, we were on a panel together, and he is from one of Indonesia's leading energy companies, navigating the transition. I've seen him present before, and I know we're getting some new information, so this is going to be fabulous. So if you could join me here. Now, the next person we have here is Alvin. If you could come and join, that would be absolutely brilliant. From TBS Energy Utama. He's bringing the internal audit lens and risk management lens to the energy transformation. So a different framework and set of challenges. And Moshe, would you come up and join us? Wonderful. He is from the Association of Indonesia's Oil and Gas Companies. So he's representing the very, very midst, an industry that simultaneously has to power Indonesia's growth and decarbonize. So, As you listen, I'd love you to go and reflect on the frameworks we talked about yesterday. Where are these companies on the sustainability readiness matrix? What's the gap between where they are and where their value chain needs to be for them to achieve the bigger goals that they've set out to achieve? And critically, given what we're focusing on, where is the opportunity inside the threats that may be perceived? So, with that, Firman, I'm going to pass the first session to you. Looking forward to this.
Thank you, Joan, for the introduction. Thank you also for ERMA for having us in this wonderful event. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are still in good spirit. Yeah, it's quite a heavy topic that we have here. I think the only light words that I see in the title is and for, so only two. Talking about, oh, not working. Can I get help? This next slide, yeah. Talking about risk, context is everything. So I want to start with this report from the World Economic Forum. Yeah, this is the top 10 global risk landscape for energy and utilities. Yeah. As you can see, they say within 2 years, extreme weather events is second. But within a decade, in 10 years' time, the top 10 is dominated by environmental-related risks. And extreme weather risks is the top risks. Context number 2, next slide, please. When we talk about energy, though, next slide, please. Yes. This is a report from IEA, the International Energy Agency. And as you can see here, they say that there will be a surge in global energy demand. And this is driven mostly by emerging and developing countries. When you see at the graph on the left side, it's India and Southeast Asia, Central and South America, Middle East, and so on. Yeah. And on the left side, what happens is that advanced markets, including China, interestingly, they will move towards more low emissions energy sources. And you see the net change, even for fossil fuel, they're negative for them because they're moving away from fossil fuels. But for emerging markets, developing countries, including Southeast Asia, as you can see, it will still be a mix between low emissions sources and fossil fuel. Now let's talk about the context of Medco Energy. Next slide, please. Just a brief introduction about our company. We started off as an oil and gas company in 1980, became public 1994. Then we established a power subsidiary, Medco Power, in 2004. Yeah. They are now leading the clean energy generation, renewables. And in 2016, we invested in a copper and gold mining company called Aman Mineral Nusantara. So copper being a critical mineral for electrification in the future. So as we've grown our business model, we've also grown internationally. So starting from operating in Indonesia, then we expand to mainly Southeast Asia, and then also Middle East. So with this growth, the business becomes more complex, the risks that we're facing, and also in the previous two contexts that I showed you, becomes even more complex. Next slide. So this then drove us to ask our stakeholders, if we were to sustain our growth, if we as an energy company would need to ensure our growth, what is it that we need to do? So there is a risk management methodology called materiality assessment. You basically engage your stakeholders, you ask them that question, what is it that we need to prioritize? And through a process of inclusive engagement, out of more than 30 lists of issues that are relevant to the energy industry, they came up with 7. Yeah, as you can see there, local communities, labor practices, transparency, human rights, business ethics, political and regulatory environment, and climate change action. So basically they say you need to pay attention to your carbon footprint and reduce them. So these priority issues then drove us to establish our sustainability framework, which you can see here. 3 pillars. Employees, they need to lead sustainability if we were to succeed. Environment and social development is basically the stewardship of environment and social beyond compliance. And then local communities empowerment, we want our communities to prosper, becoming self-reliant in alignment with the UN SDG. And that 3 pillars can only happen if we have a strong foundation of governance, which include, as you can see there at the right bottom corner, a robust enterprise risk management system. Now, next is, so I'm going to talk about the system that we have developed since 2017. Before 2017, risk management was focusing on business development risks. Yeah, so very much financial. Sapta said that it's a small group of expertise, not the entire organization, but we changed that. So our aspiration was basically how to make risk management a culture within the entire organization, becoming the DNA, so that everyone can identify risk opportunities and basically create value, yeah, optimize it, and protect whatever value we have created. So, and we decided to have a common language standard, which is the ISO 31000. Why? Because we are a company that grows on M&A, so mergers and acquisitions, and we need to have one single language, so we choose ISO 31000. And I want to touch upon the Medco risks universe that you see here. I mentioned before, 2017 is focusing on the financial risks. Then when we deployed this, we looked at operational risks, human resource, HSE, strategic risks, that it becomes a more holistic approach. So in a way, this is basically looking at sustainability from a risk management perspective. So not only the financial, or in your book you said the silent E, economic, I think, Joanne, is the silent E. And the other factors are the ESG, basically. And 2021, we expand our universe to look at climate-related risks, and we follow the recommendation of TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And they basically saying, look at transitional and physical risk from climate exposures. Next, please. So that's what we did to define our strategy in climate change. Our aspiration is to become net zero by 2050 for Scope 1 and Scope 2. This is in alignment with the Paris Agreement, very much investor-driven. When you don't have this aspiration, you're basically irrelevant for them. So you have to be in alignment with the Paris Agreement. Now, for Scope 3, more difficult, because you're talking about value chain, downstream, upstream value chain. We decided 2060. Why? Because at that time, this is 2021 when we did this, we work mainly in Indonesia, and Indonesia's NDC is net zero 2060. So we had to hook with the national regulation and policy, basically. Yeah. So it was a more pragmatic approach to decide on 2060. And of course, they've changed now. And at some point, we need to have a look at the strategy again. So with that aspiration, we looked again, transitional risk, which basically is reputational, technology, market, and we looked at physical climate risks and derived the strategy, which basically are the mitigations of the risks. First pillar, reducing emissions from current operations through implementation of technologies, best practices. Carbon removal, CCS for us is very important. Nature-based solutions is also important for us. Transitioning to low carbon energy, we still believe, remember that the second context that I show you, fossil fuel will still be relevant, and we believe that gas is and will be a transition fuel, and then growing at the same time our renewables portfolio. And the third part is, how do we adapt? How do we change our designs to be more climate adaptive? Yeah, it's how do we basically manage exposure from already existing climate change? Yeah. And that has to be supported by enablers, governance, basically commitment at all levels, capacity development, data management. You cannot measure, you cannot control what you cannot measure. Transparency, I will talk more about it, and then collaboration and engagement. So this pledge will not mean anything if you don't have clear targets. So we also established interim targets for 2025, 2030, clear KPIs. That helps us in going through the process of achieving this aspiration. Next slide, I want to touch upon, because we're talking about climate, physical risks, extreme weathers. So we did this method called Climate Change Risk Assessment, CCRA, which basically identifies and define mitigations, to climate physical risks using the IPCC scenarios. We used midterm and long-term timeframes, 2030 and 2050, and SSP1, which is the Shared Socioeconomic Pathways. It's basically a scenario analysis. SSP1 is basically the green scenario. SSP5 is basically business as usual, very much fossil fuel-based development and so on and so forth. So based on this assessment, we identify in the operations that we have, we will be exposed to 8 climate hazards. Extreme heat, water stress, wildfires came out second and third, and then 3 different types of flooding, storms, and cyclone. So this is sort of like the overview of the climate hazards that we will be exposed to. The next step is to look at asset level. What are relevant to each of our assets? We did a qualitative assessment, 80 assets we looked at, initially 25 in 2021, then in 2023 we looked at 80 assets in oil and gas, power, and also in our offices. And just since 2023, we did actually quantitative assessment, meaning that we quantify the impact of those climate extremes, both in the oil and gas, power, businesses. The first 4 assets, we got help from a consultant. But this year, we did it internally, which is very important as part of the capability development of the organization, because this is something that you need to do on a regular basis moving forward in the future. And based on those assessments, then you can basically identify what adaptation measures and mitigation measures you need to do. So this we have done, and we will continue to do. Next slide, please. Now, this is very important. Reporting drive actions. That's this sustainability reporting. So what we have done in terms of all this anticipation in terms of climate risks needs to be reported publicly. And the media that we use is sustainability reporting. It's a very strategic and powerful tool to communicate with our stakeholders, in particular investors. And to establish integrity in the reporting, we audit our data. As you can see there on the right top corner, those are the indicators in the GRI standard that we audit, initially starting with 31 indicators in 2017, now becomes 101 indicators out of the 150-ish indicators that we report. And this also becomes the basis for us to report in leading mainstream global platforms like CDP, which focuses on initially climate performance, now become also nature performance. And then MSCI is one of the prominent rating agencies. We use this sustainability also as a tool. So this will be my second to last slide. I think next, yeah, if you want to know more about what we do, there's some QR codes on the screen. I would invite you to have a look at our reporting so that you can learn about what we have done thus far. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The pathway you've shown shows how incredibly pragmatic and practical it is. That as soon as we stop thinking it needs to be rocket science and outside of our capacity, it becomes incredibly pragmatic and doable. And the transparency piece is that step to courage to go, we can share because it actually helps align other people to our action, which is powerful. We've got a couple of questions coming through. Awesome. Now, just as a little bit of extra incentive, I bought a copy of Green Site for whoever asked the most fascinating question. Up here, we will vote what we think's the most fascinating question, okay? So it won't just be me. But Firman, thank you so much because you set it up beautifully for Alvin talking about when you're coming in from the internal audit as well as the risk perspective, what then starts layering on after that. Now I have discovered we have a piece of tech up here. Oh my God. It's got buttons on it. So if you'd like to control the slides directly, there you go. Over to you. Looking forward to this.
Okay. Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to express my condolences first to all of the victims in North Sumatra, Aceh, and West Sumatra. Because, you know, over the past week, we have seen many reports, many news related to the extreme weather, right? Which issue that strongly relates to one of our key discussion now, which is the climate extremes. Okay. So, in TBS, we see that climate risk is a financial risk, and we need a strategy, a clear strategy to future-proof the business and unlock a low carbon growth. So, we do have, you know, a strategic roadmap, which what we call as the TBS 2030. This is a roadmap toward a sustainable future and consists of 3 pillars. The first one is the thriving environment, which consists of the climate change mitigation, land and biodiversity protection, and water stewardship. And the second pillar is related to the empowered people. You know, we believe that sustainability cannot be achieved without empowering our people as well as our communities. And the third one is the trusted partner. As a building trust is fundamental to a long-term value creation. So, at the heart of this transformation, our flagship goal is achieving carbon neutrality by 2030, which, you know, guides both our sustainability and environmental strategy and operational decision. So, this is our journey. This is our Odyssey, shifting the core, responsibly passing out coal and building a new low carbon portfolio. You know, we previously focused on the coal-fired power plant and coal mining, and then we perform the carbonization levers, such as the first one is accelerate the carbonization of assets by divested 200 megawatts and phase out our 3 coal mining concession by 2027. And then next one is we perform the grow low carbon businesses. We invest more than 600 million in low carbon businesses, and our EBITDA, surprisingly, increasingly driven by waste, renewable energy, and EV. And the last one, we also focus on operational and decarbonization as well as the governance. So we reduce greenhouse gases emissions across all assets and strengthening data of control and embedding ESG oversight into our business strategy. So this strategy represents our real commitment to becoming a lower carbon business fully aligned with our TBS 2030 commitments. This is our, the journey. This is what we have done and what we would like to partnership with all of you. From the governance and credibility, we have the ESG committee. Every quarter, we perform the meeting with the ESG committee, and we have so many insights from the ESG committee related to our TBS 2030. And then we do also perform the climate risk and ERM integration. The last one is limited assurance on greenhouse gases and energy data. And we also seek for our partnership opportunities. The first one is seeking strategic sustainability link in financial instrument. And the next one is co-investing in regional waste, renewable energy, and green mobility ecosystem. And the last one is sharing learnings and advocating for scalable transition pathway. So previously, we only focused on the coal mining. We only focused on the coal-fired power plant. We now shifting. And we would like to ask you to also join us to shifting into the renewable energy, EV, as well as the waste management company. This is what I would like to explain more about what we do in performing climate risk and ERM integration. So, me as the Senior VP of Audit and Risk Management, which is the combination of the second line and third line, we try to see from these three aspects. The first one is our risk management. Just like Pak Firman in Medco, we also use the ISO 31000 as our framework, and we build our risk register with dynamic scenario planning, which means that we also need to update our risk register periodically, not just every single month or not just every 6 months or annual year, but every single day actually. And from that, we scope from the TBS and our subsidiaries. We define into 7 types of risk. The first one is the operational, financial, compliance, safety, strategic. And 2 new type of risks that we developed in last 2 years is related to the cybersecurity as well as the climate risk. So previously, we're not just seeing the climate or cybersecurity as type of risk, but we now try to focus because we see from the global top risk, we benchmark from the global top risk and so on, and we decided to make two new type of risk to be embedded into our risk register. From that, we try to identify which one is the most significant one, which we call as the risk drivers. So the definition of the risk driver is only for the significant risk, the extreme or the high risk. And then we also try to make a quantification of the risk. Because, our boss background is from investment and banking. So he will be more aware if we can provide some numbers to him, some quantification. So we're not just talking about, this is just our risk, this is just our mitigation. No, we try to make a quantification as well as the amount of dollars of each of the risks as well as the mitigation. From the sustainability perspective, since we started to, embedded the climate as our type of risk, as our new type of risk, we also make a strategy to make the risk integration. The first one, we perform the workshop. Start with the awareness. Why does the climate risk matter? And the next one, we try to embed the climate risk into the existing ER framework, both physical and transition. And the last one, we also perform a closing message to all of the risk officer and risk owner that the climate risk is a shared responsibility. So we're not saying that it's just for the sustainability or ESG department only or risk management only, but it's a shared responsibility to all of us. And from that, we also try to climate risk align with the sustainability team. From that, of course, because I'm from the internal audit, we do perform the risk-based audit, which means that all of our audit plan comes from the significant risk one. We try to see sustainability and risk driver and consider as our internal audit plan, and then we can also embed it into our annual audit plan and framework. So not just like that. Based on the audit, based on the risk, they also need to be provided in our COO monthly plan. So every single month we perform the COO monthly meeting, and then each of risk owner need to provide their audit status, their risk status, and they also have to, complete it, the risk register to be built as the consolidated risk report. And also, when we talk about the crisis, knock the wood, if something happen, climate extreme, disrupt operations, supply chains, or grid, our emergency response and crisis management team will coordinate and guide subsidiaries with any incidents. We also conduct the annual crisis simulation exercise and periodic compliance audit of our crisis management system. So this team works closely with our business continuity and disaster recovery teams to ensure operation can continue and return to normal as quickly as possible. Last thing that I'd like to present is about, this is what we do especially for the climate risk. So the first one, we're refining our risk focus. For last year, for example, we identified more than 300 material climate risk prioritized for actions. The first step that we do is we try to identify full universe of risk. We assess of peers, academic literature, and benchmark to find a full universe of risk to TBS. And the next one, we also perform the preliminary filtering to identify the potential impact on TBS. By assessing risk based on the potential effect, operation, reputation, as well as of financial performance. And the next one, we try to analyze based on the 3 climate change scenario. Now, this is something that interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because we see from the 3 perspectives of scenario, and we try to make a mitigation based on those scenario. The first scenario is related to the speedy net zero, which assume the global temperature rises below 2 degrees in line with the Paris Agreement. So in this scenario, TBS transition away from high carbon business unit will continue to be crucial to maintaining its competitiveness. And the second scenario is what we call as the slow and steady. It moderate scenario where the temperature rises between 2 degrees and 3 degrees by, and this slow and steady scenario envision a more gradual transition to a low carbon economy. And the worst one, the worst scenario is the hot house world, a worst case scenario with temperatures rising over 3 degrees. And under this scenario, the resilience of TBS strategy depends on heavily on its ability to adapt to extreme and physical risk. The company actually has already begun the implementing flood defenses and fire management system, but maybe further investment in resilience will be necessary if the global climate actions remain weak. So from this scenario, it will be useful to test possible future outcomes under a specific conditions. So this methodology also enables us to identify possible future threats or opportunities, define trigger points to set contingency plans in motion, validate strategy against sets of scenario, and continuous monitoring and adjustment. So my closing statement is, no transition is straightforward. We move with intent and informed judgment. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's when I see presentations like we have had from Alvin and the practicality and Firman, it's part of what reassures me that the kind of ambition that Indonesia has for 2050 is viable, and the kind of future that we are lucky enough to have had in the past. Because, you know, we are the last generation who knows what it is like to live in an under 1.5 degree world. And the only way we'll have the next generation is if we take the action. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to how you're wrestling with these significant challenges, because they are, and you're key to the future. And to help you, if you would like, I will even give you a clicker, or you could ask the team. There we go. Over to you, Moshe.
All right. Thank you, Joanne. Distinguished speaker, Mr. Firman, Mr. Alvin. Thank you for ERMA for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. Okay. All right, so let's go back to reality, shall we? So, next year. Okay. So my name is Moshe Rizal. I'm the chairman of investment committee of ASPERMIGAS, is Indonesian Oil and Gas Associations. I'm also part of many society and also my own investment advisory firm in Indonesia. We are working with various projects and businesses to get funding and to get them ready to get funding as well. So I'm one of the managing director, president director of Putra Patama Investama Energy. So let's go back to reality. So what is the reality of business leadership over climate actions? Do businesses do what they have to say? Okay, this is one of the presentations, reports from EY, last November, last month. Some key points here. Inaction can be costly to business, future inaction costing 15% of the annualized revenue average. But majority of companies, 68%, so they did a survey for thousands of companies around the world, report having undertaken quantitative risk assessment, yet only 17% actually disclose financial impact of those risks. 92% companies assess quantitative impact of physical risks, but just 44% said they have adaptation measure in place. So more than 50%, they actually do not have measures. 64% companies have transition plan, but majority of them either show no progress or are moving backward regarding prior commitment to transition plan. So here we see that a lot of companies talk so much about transition, talk so much about sustainability, but little action. So we need to change this. So one of the things that, this is my friend Peter Cockcroft, he just released a book last year about carbon management. This is one of the way to actually mitigate the risks of climate change, is to how you manage your carbon, how to reduce your emissions from your own business operation to the supply chain itself. So there's 7 steps. There's a very great book. So why do we need a carbon management process? Because environmental responsibility, regulatory compliance, which is very important, government incentive, stakeholder expectation, competitive advantage, investor relations, and risk management. But 2 most important things that why people actually, or why businesses are actually doing the sustainable actions is first is regulatory compliance, second is investor relations. So it's all about money, it's all about compliance, so they don't want to get penalty and so on and so on. So the government is important, and also financial sector is also important. That's why action is money. Yes, compliance over sustainability actions need actually funding. That's why the financial sector is actually leading the world in transitions. Or shall we say, is there any transitions or not? Yeah, the COP30 this year in Brazil, for me, was a disaster. COP29 was also not very good. There's a lot of complaining from the developing countries that Western countries doesn't take enough actions or take enough responsibility to actually mitigate the risk that they actually initiate by becoming the first who industrialized nations. So that's why we need more actions, and I think we need to push from the government as well as the financial sector to move forward faster. So how far are we from our decarbonization targets globally? Yeah. So this chart is very interesting. You see that during COVID is actually the lowest emission that we had ever in history, modern history, since World War I. So the reduction of emissions was so great, as you can see here, is because of COVID-19. This shows that emission is not because what we are using, is our consumption. We consume too much. And we are growing actually faster than the transition itself. So the consumption is growing faster than the transition. So in the reality, there is actually no energy transition. That's the reality. What we call actually now is energy addition. So we only use the clean energy to add more energy to our consumption. And the consumption is growing so much. Look at if we don't consume, the emission drops to the lowest. Next. So which sector are among the biggest? Of course, energy sector, industrial as well. Electricity generation only accounts less than 18% of the total greenhouse. So there's energy used by the industry other than electricity that actually consume much more than the electricity itself. Yeah, so we need to look into that as well. We need to have an option, alternative option to actually reduce their consumption as well as their emissions. So this is from NDC, a UN report. The gap in 2030 is still huge. We are actually not transitioning. So that's the problem. So the 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, we are actually moving towards that, to be honest. So updated NDC COP26 lower than projected emission by less than 1%. Unconditional NDC lower projected emission 2030 by 5% and conditionally by 10%. A 30% reduction need to get on track to 2% or to 1.5 Celsius or 45% to 1.5 Celsius. So we are still far away. We are still far away and we do not have, that's why I say COP30 is a disaster because there is no there is no clear plan on how we can achieve 45% reduction. And currently, because of the geopolitics, mostly geopolitics, the investment trend is actually very constrained. Yeah, this is data 2023, 2024. The world investment is actually getting more constrained. It's not because of lack of money. It's because of lack of trust. Because there is a risk of geopolitical risk, climate risk, and so on, which is greater and greater. That's why people who want to invest, they think twice, they think third time, fourth time, and so on. So the global investment is currently very, very constrained, but Indonesia is actually growing. Because what? Because of the mining industry. So how in oil and gas industry? Because I'm in oil and gas industry as well as in energy industry. So the demand trend, EIA say that there is a peak in 2029 because of China. But if you look at the gas, it will continue to be consumed, the growth, yeah, until beyond to 2050. Because what? Because we have a new trend right now. We have data center trend, we have AI. All those consume energy, and they need a very stable energy. There's only two things in the world. We have a stable energy, gas power plant, as well as nuclear power plant. Major oil and gas company back down on their commitment. We've seen that a lot because they make a lot of money in 2022. They make less now, yes, but it's still a very challenging way to actually push them to back down and then get their commitment back. Here, the RUN 2017 is projection by the government released in 2017. People always see this slide, this one, the percentage, where you can see the oil and gas, fossil fuels is coming down as a percentage. But if you look at the volume, it's actually going up. Why? Because consumption again, because demand is going up, because we need growth, more than 5% growth GDP, more than 4% growth in populations. All those need energy. That's why in terms of volume, there is no sunset industry in Indonesia for oil and gas. So how can the oil and gas industry decarbonize their business? One of the way, the fastest way is through methane. Most countries already make a pledge, including Indonesia, a global methane pledge, how to reduce their methane. Why methane? Because methane is 86 times more potent than CO2 itself in terms of GHG. Yeah? So it is the fastest way to actually becoming net zero, reducing your methane emissions. Yeah? They release a satellite as well to monitor methane. This is why methane is so important. And OGMP is one of the UN initiatives to actually reduce oil and gas industry, their methane emissions. And I'm happy today, Pak Firman mentioned that Medco has joined OGMP this year, yeah, in November. I see the report. Pertamina last year, back in 2023, we had a workshop with the ministry about oil and gas methane partnership. And luckily, 1 year later, Pertamina joined, and 1 year later, Medco joined. So I'm happy I hope you get your gold standard, yeah? Gold standard in 5 years, Pak. There's also OGCI, but this is only for 12 major oil and gas companies. It's quite difficult. You need to have $100 million commitment, at least, yeah? And their intention is to reduce not their production, but their carbon intensity of the production. CCS is also initiative by oil and gas industry, yeah, to reduce the emission, but currently it's very expensive, doesn't prove too much value for the industry and as well as the emission reduction. There's a lot of underperformed projects in the world currently. And this is one of the things that I think we need to push. McKinsey has come up with a report in 2014 showing that actually Indonesia and Brazil is the two most have the biggest potential in the world in terms of NBS, nature-based solutions. So we have more than 10 gigaton of carbon reduction potential per year in terms of NBS. So I think a lot of companies need to work on this. We're also working with a Hungarian company who also work on this for carbon management and carbon offsets. So last words. There's a tight resource. This is for the government. There's a tight resource. We're juggling with what we call an energy trilemma. There is energy security, energy affordability, and energy transition. But the order is always energy security first, affordability, and only transition. So that's why there's a lot of, like our nations wants to become industrial, we need a lot of energy, stable energy, cheap energy. That's why we're still consuming fossil fuels. And for business leaders, they must step up their roles over fighting climate change for secure their business continuity. Yes, government around world titan is ESG. There's a lot of greenwashing by the business, so the government is tightening their criteria, and business leaders must invest in better and fastest way to reduce their emission as part of their strategic plan. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you. I am going to choose to not see that as depressing. Because the reality is, if we do not see what's happening in the physical world, the real world now, in the decision-making world, we are not in an ability to influence it. So I've had the fortune or misfortune of living in countries where starvation and malnutrition and civil war were part of the framework. I know what food collapse looks like. It's not pretty. And a 3-degree world, if not a 2.5-degree world, is food collapse. So, you know, people talk about the climate transitions as if it's out there. The reality is, I suspect many people in this room in your life have had experience that can relate to what I'm talking about. So there's a real reason to go, this may be present, it doesn't need to be our future. And how do we deal with the energy needs in a way that creates this more positive future? This is the joys of leadership. So we have more than a couple of questions. You've been an amazing group online and in the room for the number of questions. We've got about 20. So there's no way, and I have one, there's no way we're going to get to them all. So I'm going to pick a couple and merge a few together and ask that when you respond, it's sort of your highest gain insight rather than a long answer, so we can cover a good amount. So one of the questions in a couple of ways showed up is that it seems that we need to collaborate with many parties, both controllable and non-controllable, in brackets government. How do you build affiliations and collaborations to actually pursue this net zero goal? I'm going to ask, because each of you has a different lens in this, I'd ask each of you, what have you found that's effective and powerful in this? Might start with you, Firman, and then to you, and then in your industry role.
Yeah, collaboration is very important with this very complex issue here. What we found is that when you have a common language, common understandings in terms of what is at stake, then it's easier for you to collaborate, whether it's with the government, whether it's peers, civil society, and so on and so forth. We have actually a team. I mean, if you look at our strategy, one is collaboration and engagement. because we realize that it is very important, because we cannot do this alone, right? So it's very important for us to pursue that. I think Medco Energy has been, to some extent, also fortunate. For instance, we have been asked to be part of the task force in terms of giving feedback through associations for the CCS regulations that came out last year. For instance, 3 regulations that came out, and others. Okay. And associations can be a good, platform, for us to collaborate. And of course, then civil society is another thing. I mean, we have become part of the UNGC, the IBCSD, and it's a good forum to learn and also to contribute. Even forum like this, we learn from others, and you need to constantly look as what is out there, and that you can achieve through collaborations.
Wonderful. Common language, use of association to collaborate and accelerate, and then civil society to be able to engage, connect, and find other opportunities. Brilliant. How about for you? What do you see as the powerful ways?
Okay, I think I totally agree with Pak Firman as my senior, which the collaboration is something that really important because, you know, in the last 2 weeks, actually, TBS just launched our new identity, which we call the event as the Redefine. So we just not changing our logo, but we also send a message about the partnership opportunities. So, you know, we can say that we are also seeking for the strategic sustainability or financial instrument, and we also try to see the partnership and collaboration for the co-investing in our 3 main sectors, just like the waste, the renewable energy, and the green mobility ecosystem. And just like what we do now, we perform the sharing learnings and, you know, advocating for a scalable transition pathway. So I think this is something that really important to us to collaborate and have back each other. Thank you.
Thank you. It also sounds that in that deliberately making a conscious choice on your identity with that rebranding is very much that side of it. Wonderful. And for you, what do you see as the powerful levers?
Yes, I agree with Pak Firman. Association is one of the best platforms to actually collaborate and get a common interest from everybody. And I was one of the chairman in IPA, in unconventional committee chairman of IPA. I was back in 2015. We managed to, you know, change the government policy. And I think if we want true change in terms of sustainability, first is the government policy itself. The government has to come up with a good policy. Let me give you a reality again here. One of the a lot of IOC is already joining OGMP, Oil and Gas Methane Partnership. Some of them, actually most of them, are already getting a gold standard IOC. And I spoke with the leaders of ESG leaders in Indonesia, representing the country manager of Indonesia, and then I asked whether they understood what's OGMP. It was before our workshop. They didn't understand. You just in the holding level, they did that. They achieved a gold standard, but in terms of within Indonesia itself, because of what? Why they didn't comply in Indonesia? Because the government policy. There is no required compliance in our government policy. That's why. And from there, move for government policy. If the government policy is really strong and solid, then we move to the investment. That's the money. When there's an incentive from the investment side, there is a push from the shareholders, there's a push from the, if you want to take a loan, you need to have ESG standards and so on, then everybody will move forward and faster because there's the money there. So I think that's my suggestion.
Okay. The government policy, which is where collaboration and associations can help shift and demonstrate, and then that provides stability that enables investors to commit more strongly and deliver on their own fiduciary duties.
Those are the steps.
Yeah, brilliant. Which is wonderful, because that leads to, I'm going to distill a couple of the questions here, is how do you deal with, each of you, the question of different time horizons and the risk profiles and valuations that come from very different time horizons? So a 2 to 3 year time horizon and what we're facing there is quite different to, because some of your big assets I know have value propositions that go out 25 plus, if not 50 years. How do you deal with these very different time horizons and these very different futures, and therefore value? We'll start with you from the audit side, and then go to you from a industry portfolio side, and then lastly, you in your combined role. So Alvin, could you start?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, in risk management, actually, we cannot predict the future, right? So it's something that really impossible to precisely predict the future. But in TBS, what we do now is we make a strategic planning on that. What I mean is, we really have a strong commitment that is called by TBS 2030. So, and we declare a TBS 2030 on 2021. So we only have 9 years to achieve our strong commitment, including the carbon neutrality. So I think as part of the question, my answer is related to how to align with the strategy, because again, we cannot predict the future as well. So we can see from what strategy that we need, and we can make several steps to achieve the strategy. Yeah, I think it's all from me.
So the approach you've taken, if I use the metaphor of this room, is to say, what do we need to do to get from here to the edge of the stage, knowing that there's uncertainty out there further in the room. But we can get here confidently and then make a decision on what goes there. Okay, brilliant. Now, we'll go for the portfolio view, and then...
Okay, thank you. So, in terms of oil and gas perspective, again, as you can see, you love so much AI, you love so much data centers, yeah, they need energy, and look at what the result is. Consumption is shoot up, and those transition is moving away right now, yeah. Oil and gas, last year, data of EIA shows that oil and gas, including gas, is going to peak in 2029. Now, the same organization, EIA, has released just a few months ago a report that, no, it will go beyond 2050. Yeah, so there is so much change, and it's because of consumption. This is how I think business also need to see how not efficiently manage their operation, reducing their cost, but also how they're reducing their consumption. That is very important. I think one of the things that if you want to move further is to reduce consumption. Second thing is how to the fastest way to reduce your emissions. In oil and gas industry, my motto is keep your methane in your system. If the methane is not releasing to the atmosphere, it doesn't create issues. But if you keep in the system, and then it creates values with less issues. So that's probably the fastest way how you actually can reduce your emission is becoming net zero. So that's the most important thing you need to focus on.
Brilliant. So there's very pragmatic tools, methane being one, immediate, actionable. The technology exists, it's a choice to do. Value immediately created, a product that's available to be used, which is significant, because what I find is often it's when the challenge is put in front of us, we start working out where's the solution to it, and now the challenge is in front of it, and here is the solution. Thank you very much, the engineers who worked that one out early enough. Firman, how about for you? How do these these different time horizons show up in your value decisions?
Yeah, so what we do is you have to project basically into the future. Yeah, I mean, looking at it from a risk management perspective, we are now stretched to predict, like Alvin has said, we are expected to be, to foresee way ahead, but then scientifically sort of like support it, which is very challenging. And I think we have no choice but to disclose in terms of value short-term, mid-term, and long-term, even though you have limitations. For instance, our planning horizon maybe is up to in the 2030s only, right? But you are expected to even report further. And this is where the scenario analysis come in, right? I spoke about trying to do the quantitative assessments, because that's what investors will be looking at. I mean, from a private sector perspective, you have to be pragmatic and basically try as much as possible with the data you have, the knowledge you have, in presenting the value in the future. Because that's what's going to be looked at by financiers, investors. And I think there's going to be a session by Deloitte this afternoon, I think, yes. The standards, reporting standard IFRS 1 and S2 is coming up. And this is where you have to report financially for your value, not only historically, but also in the future, short-term, mid-term, and long-term. So those time horizons, you cannot avoid it. You have to do it. And with the best information available, and this is again risk management, and then basically convince your stakeholders that you will be doing well in the future.
In the context of the bigger scenarios that we've had shared today. Okay, now we're down to our last 35 seconds. So I think that will mean the organizers will say, Joanne, wrap this up. And also I'm mindful, the next thing is lunch, and lunch is always a good thing. So the last question I had, but I think the three of you have given a powerful response on what you've just said. The last question I had was, if we could accelerate the transition from intention to a greater investor grade readiness, not in years, but in months, what would that unlock for your organizations? You highlighted the power of thinking about how do we deconsume, how do we dematerialize, and the methane question is part of that. How do we decarbonize in other ways than we've traditionally thought as very powerful? You've brought in the fact that when we start looking at value horizons and the future forecasts of these, they become very concrete ways of describing how value is going to be created and destroyed over time. And you've been absolutely articulate on these very practical actions that are doable, defensible, auditable, and provable. So with that, I would like to thank every one of you for your wonderful questions, for your attention, and for the future you're going to create with value for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was the third panel discussion of the day. We kindly invite our moderator and speakers to please be upstanding to receive the token of appreciation from Risk Beyond 2025. And for this moment, we kindly invite Tasha Christina as the Risk Beyond Head Committee to come on stage to give the token of appreciation for both speakers and moderator in this session for sharing their expertise and sharing the wonderful insights to all of the participants at Risk Beyond 2025. Same with the previous photo session, we kindly invite you to take out the natural stone cube, all right, and show them to the camera. May this be a reminder of this remarkable occasion we have in beautiful island of Bali. Allow me to lead the photo session on the count of 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. And with that, let's once again give big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Firman Darmawan, Moshe Rizal, and Alvin Novalino and Joanne Flin. Thank you very much for your contribution. We kindly invite you to please have a seat. Thank you very much. Wow.